Hello, everyone, and welcome to Crafty Chat, and this is episode number 25, right? Like I say it with such confidence, and then it's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what my email said this morning was 25. So, as always, I'm joined by Nancy and Lucy, and we have our special guest this week, or this episode, and that's Pat. So, Pat, we work with at the library. So, hello and welcome, Pat.
Hi.
Excited to have you here to discuss. Mainly, the main idea was to talk about working without patterns. So, what kind of things do you work on? I guess first of all, and that you don't use patterns for, that you refuse the pattern.
So I'm an embroiderer. I am really not very accomplished in other crafts. I mean, I don't really do watercolors or pen and ink, and I cannot knit, though I have tried desperately and have just decided it is not my thing. So I learned embroidery from my mom when I was like 14, and it was the stamped patterns that you would get in the 50s with, pillowcases and napkins, that kind of thing. Like this is one of the pillowcases.
Oh yeah.
Where they showed you the colors to use. They said the stitches that you use, and that was what I did for years and years. And it was nice because it's just kind of a mindless activity where you don't have to think too much. But then after my little sister died, who was kind of my crafting mentor and sensei, I had a horrid fight with my husband, and I didn't know. My head was just blowing up, and I needed to either shoot him, walk away. I didn't know what I was going to do. And so I grabbed some floss and some just plain piece of cotton and did this.
Oh wow.
Because it showed how I was feeling. My wings were broken for my sister. My heart was bruised from our fight. And it was really the first time I had ever done anything off script. I just said, this is what I feel like, and this is how it all came out. So it was pretty amazing. And an eye-opening for me that I could actually do that. I didn't have to have a pattern always. And that it was also a nice creative release.
Mm-hmm.
I watched the show with you guys, and you seem all so creative, and you're always going off script, and I love that. That's just it's wonderful to see.
Oh, well, thank you.
Your embroidery is so gorgeous, and I know the first project that I saw you work on was one for, I think, was it your husband's birthday or was it you guys' anniversary?
Their anniversary.
The anniversary one, yeah. I got the thing. I'll show you.
The two radios with the connecting cord, and that was so cute. And it was just like watching you go through the planning process with that was fascinating for me, because we have some of the same planning processes where I do like a lot of the bigger embroidery projects that I would do, where I would draw the pattern or I would doodle something out and then transfer it to the fabric. So it was planned in that regard, but it was but it wasn't like pure free form where you're just not even drawing a pattern, you're just kind of putting needle to fabric and just going for it. Mm-hmm. So that was something that I really admired of, like, I haven't delved into that because I've just been really nervous of having to, I don't know, I have this idea in my head of embroidery of like, once you make a stitch, it's permanent, which is not necessarily the way it is with embroidery. So that
I hear you. Yeah, very much so.
More recently, I've been cutting stuff out and restitching it, and that's been really liberating. But
you guys were talking about that with the creative bug too, how you felt comfortable doing that. I just started watching that. I'm really intrigued by this lady.
That's Rebecca Ringquist?
Yeah,
she's great.
Yeah.
That was my
No,
sorry.
go ahead, Lucy.
That was my first foray into embroidery, though I've long wanted to do it. And I think like mostly I knit, and it's hard to go off pattern there. I think, you can't, it's unless you're like really making sure your stitch count is right. And so it was fun to do that sampler, because I think I saw how you could just use fabric as a canvas and floss as like your paint or pen.
Mm-hmm.
And with armed with a few different stitches, you could start to create. So it was kind of cool.
Yeah.
Another thing I remember when I was watching that resonated is when you guys were talking about the feel and the sound of the thread, the poke. I love that sound, and the feel of the thread going through that, kind of the smooth of it going through the rough of the fabric. Love that, because I'm super hands-on. So that's I think one of the reasons I always stick with embroidery, because I don't get that with knitting for some reason. It doesn't have the same tactile. I don't know what it is.
That sound.
Yeah, it's that tactile experience, because as much as I love the feel of crochet and knitting as you're doing it, it doesn't have quite that same, the process is really repetitive, and that's soothing for me. But the difference with embroidery for me is that it's a very tactile experience, where you're having the needle going through the fabric, the stitches themselves, the way they feel is different. And also the stabbing myself when I'm not paying attention. That's usually a little bit of a wake up call, because I was doing that a lot this week for some reason.
Just kind of a bonus.
Yeah, just picking up my embroidery, sewing, and just stabbing myself like 3 or 4 times of like, why am I doing this?
That's why it's like the difference in when I'm journaling, I always want to use a pencil, because I like the friction of the pencil against the paper, as opposed to a pen or a gel pen or anything like that. It's just not as satisfying for me.
Yeah, that's something that I hear consistently from a lot of creators, is that their process is very specific to them, because it is a personal preference of what your sensory experience is. And I when I would talk about this in college and earlier on in my life, I get kind of weird looks of like, well, you're making something. It's not about the experience. It's about the product. And that kind of never really jived with me, because it's just like, no, it's just as much about the process as it is about the finished product. I learned later on that I'm more of a process crafter instead of a product crafter. But I hear that more from folks that have stuck with various kinds of crafting through a large chunk of their life, is that it's not just about the product, it's also about the process, and it's about that journey to getting through, and the sensory experience that it is. But that also kind of jives with me of like, I see crafting as a form of art, and that the reality of art therapy and how much it helps people is, to me, very clear, because it helps me a lot psychologically. So,
which makes me feel better about the fact that I so rarely actually finish anything. And I always felt bad about that, because I really don't care about the final product. I care about the process. So I'm like, oh, all right. So I'm not a crazy woman after all who can't finish anything.
No, you're not. My work's in progress closet. It's not a basket anymore. It's a closet. Definitely would agree with you there. Of nice. I don't know. I'm a serial caster on her, and then not so much I don't know, maybe more a finishing projects person now than I was years ago, but.
Or if I find I finished something, like I just did knit a hat that was doing, color work, because I wanted to kind of practice that. I finished the hat. It's okay. I like it, but it's more for me, like I was learning the skill that maybe I'll, it's like if I do finish something, sometimes I'm just like, all right, and I'm over it in my mind, because what I was enjoying was the process. So
yeah, that's I finished a hat recently that was like that, or I'd had it working on it for a long time and had the yarn for ages, and it was just like, I just want to finish this. And now that I've done with it, it's like, I'm happy with it. It's okay. I'm not like insanely crazy about it, like the color work cowl that I just finished, of like, this is the greatest thing that I've ever made. I'm so proud of this. Like, it's different experiences for different projects, I think.
Yeah, I think about like that black sweater that I made, that cocoon sweater. I always go back to this thing, because it was a total winging it process, because it's just basically when you make those cocoons, it's like a big rectangle and then you seam up the short sides to kind of make your armholes. So I'm like, yeah, just, do it till it seems the right size. Of course, now I'm all fussy about it. Like there's different things that don't fit. And I made the sleeves long. So I've recently been taking it back to the 3/4 sleeve. So that's really fun. Trying to undo black fuzzy yarn that's actually been worn and washed a couple times. And now I'm trying to undo
Oh, there's no way.
I'm insane. Well, I got one of them, but
so now you have to do the other.
Or not. And I had to set that aside. It was like a month ago. I haven't gotten back to it. But I think that with crochet, I do fall into that more easily, because even something like this that I'm wearing, you just take a stitch and you can just build on it. And it's so much easier to take it apart than knitting is.
Yeah.
Actually, although I was reading this memoir, which I believe the title was Yarn, and I can't remember the name of the author, but she talks about, she first started learning how to knit, and she had to knit the pieces of a sweater and then seam it together. And then she met somebody who just knit for it to fit, and she would knit in the round and didn't follow a pattern. And she just took off. I'm like, wow, that's amazing.
That is amazing.
And like, so that's possible. So she would just kind of knit it, I guess, and you just kind of compare how it's fitting on your body. And
wow.
Yeah.
I see a lot of formulas. A lot for sweaters and socks specifically, of like taking a little bit of a pre-planning process, like taking your measurements, figuring out your gauge, and then doing the math to make the pattern to your measurements. And then like they talk about how the next step behind that is, once you figure that out, you can kind of just do whatever you feel like. You don't really necessarily work off of a pattern, so it's not like a step-by-step process. It's more, knit until you're happy and then make this change or that change. And that's really intimidating to me as a knitter, because I do really well. I do a lot better with knitting and crochet when I'm actually having somebody tell me what to do. I did find a course online that's Freeform Crochet that I am going to try to take, just because I love the organic shapes that crochet makes. I've been really enchanted, and I think I've talked about this in Crafty Chat before, but there's an art project that's crocheted C-forms that are made from recycled materials.
That's cool.
And that's always been so enchanting to me, of like, I really want to learn how to do something like that. But yeah, that's fiber arts for me have always been really pattern oriented, but embroidery and sewing, for whatever reason, is always more like I'm not working off of a pattern, or I'm creating my own pattern. Like I'm doing something entirely, creating the pattern from step one. I think, yeah, I do. I made this, it's a book cover, and then it's got pockets and stuff on the inside for my embroidery stuff. It's got like a flat pocket and then several pockets over here. There was, and a needle case. There was no pattern for this. I just drew it up, took the measurements.
That's
did
impressive.
math for
I
it.
can't imagine.
I did. So the biggest thing with like making your own pattern is mock-ups. I have to do a mock-up. So like I'm doing a video for a metal clasp box, sewn box. I've done 2 of these so far and they don't quite fit. So I'm trying to figure out the process of like how I'm going to make that and make it work. But this was a failed experiment. So like, it's a lot of experimenting and a lot of tinkering, but it's the taking the measurements correctly. It's knowing when to add the seam allowances. It's knowing, making sure that you've got all the math right. And, being in school, would never have thought that I would be able to do this. Absolutely never. Math was horrible for me in school. I was terrible at it. But as soon as I applied it to crafting, especially to knitting, everything just all of a sudden started to click.
And don't you wish they would teach math that way?
Yes.
I think one of my friends had put her kid through the Steiner schools when he was really
Yeah,
little.
Waldorf does it that way.
Yeah, they say they learn a lot through knitting, like
yes,
math
and I love that.
Very early on too. Yeah.
And I think
maybe that's why I don't like knitting, too much math.
Yeah, that might be. I was intimidated with knitting early on because of all the math, and it makes more sense to me now. But like, I went to public school, so that was not necessarily something that was there. And the knitters that I knew growing up were all pattern knitters. So they'd find a pattern and then work the pattern until it was done. So it was less free form and less making their own patterns. which does take a certain tilt of talent to do. I stumble across a lot of designing courses for knitwear that I think is really, really great, because there's a learning curve for writing. There's a reason why like technical writing and stuff is actually a degree that you can get, and it's a skill set that you can cultivate.
Oh, yeah.
It's writing instructions for other people is complicated.
So my question is, I guess, basically to you and or to Nancy and Lucy. Who's you? So because you are knitters who work with patterns, do you read your patterns before you start the project? Like, do you read it all the way through, start to finish?
Yeah.
No. And
I didn't always. Yeah, I didn't used to as much, and then I would get frustrated with myself because I hadn't done that, and I was tearing something out because I just didn't anticipate. Or it becomes an unfinished project because I didn't know that I was going to have to do this certain kind of thing towards the end. And so I'm like, I don't want to learn that. Yeah. Whereas if I look at it in the beginning, so
ready for it. Yeah.
That's because I learned to do that the hard way.
Sometimes I'm learning to do it the hard way. I get scared off from the project because I read it and I'm like, oh my gosh, oh wait, this part, and then it's just like, well, just take it one step at a time. But.
Yeah.
I feel like I got cocky early on when I first started heavily getting into knitting, which was when I was hired in at the library and met Heidi and Lucy and a bunch of other knitters at the library of like, I can do this, and knitted my first pair of socks and it went absolutely smoothly. And I got super arrogant and was like, I can do anything. And then the next couple projects proceeded to be monumental failures and had to frog them all several times. And I'm still working on one of the shawls that's been like that. But no, it's so it's kind of a hubris moment for me of like, no, there are things that I missed along the way that I can pick up to make this easier. But the thing that I pay the closest attention to now with knitting patterns is on the pattern page, because a lot of the patterns that I like are paid patterns, so you don't necessarily get to read the whole thing before you actually work the pattern. I really appreciate it when designers have not only full measurements of the finished garment for multiple sizes, but what skills you'll need. So like a short list of the different type of stitches, the different type of skills, and then also having alterations you can make, substitutions. So having a little bit of variety of like, you can make this, and so like you can make a shawl in 3 different sizes. Here's the stitch count for all of them. Here's the yardage for what yarn you're going to need. So like the more information that a designer gives me up front, and the more that I can see it finished with those variations, the more comfortable I feel buying the pattern, because I know what I'm getting into. Because like with a lot of, I see this more with crochet patterns, and I've gotten burned by this of buying a pattern blind and not knowing exactly what it's doing, getting the printed pattern and realizing that I don't understand what they're talking about. So their style of pattern writing just doesn't jive with my thought process. So I get lost really quickly, even when I'm reading through the whole pattern. So I've become a little gun shy about buying a pattern blind like that, because I've had that happen a couple times now. And then I ask myself, like, why did I buy this pattern? And I've had good luck, thankfully, contacting designers and asking questions and being like, hey, I don't understand this. And they're pretty good about getting back to me and answering questions and stuff. So
yeah, they do that. And that's the nice thing too on Ravelry. You can look at the projects that other people have made. And so sometimes you can see where they went off script, like using a different kind of yarn or even a different weight, and like how the pattern can work. Because sometimes you really can't replace, like a DK for a worsted, because it's just not going to have the same drape, or it's just not going to, it just doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that's, I love watching other people's creative process. So like projects on Ravelry is my kryptonite for like rabbit holes, black holes that I fall into on the internet, because I just love watching other people's projects, and like the better the notes, the happier that I am. There's a poncho that I'm looking at making. I loved the original pattern, but then someone did some alterations to make it longer and add armholes to it. And I was just like, I'm making that. I'm copying that exactly and making that. I love it. And she did super, super detailed notes, and I was really geeked about it.
Great. Like, I'm terrible. I never post anything.
I've gotten a little worse. Yeah, I was really, really good for a long time of not only keeping notes in a book, but also posting them on Ravelry. I've kind of fallen a little bit out of the habit as I'm like slowing down on projects.
So Pat, I've got another question I wanted to ask you about, because you've been doing embroidery for quite a while, and I know you embroider on like pillowcases, and you're working on a quilt. Not doing the quilting part, but you were making those quilting squares, which was awesome for the whole family quilt. But so do you do any embroidery on clothing, and like clothing that you might wear, you know, somewhat regularly, kind of thing?
For instance, these shorts.
For instance, the shorts that you did all the wabi sabi.
Wabi sabi, yeah. Yeah. So this was me spending too much time on Pinterest and learning about imperfect embroidery to actually emphasize not what's wrong, but you know, the hole or the tear or whatever. So I thought, oh, I have these gardening shorts that I just love because who cares? I can get them dirty. They always come clean, and they have all these rips and tears from when in the pockets I would put my trowel and it would rip the edge. So I thought, all right, I'm going to try this wabi sabi idea. So I've got, this is one of the patented cuts on the seam, and I did just the red, obvious. Here's another hole. I don't know. This one is just hilarious because it turned out so horrible. That's supposed to be like a basket weave. Didn't plan it out right. It did not work at all, but I'm going to keep it because it's just too funny.
That woven darning is over holes is the hardest thing to do, though.
This is like a little patch, and I just embroidered around the edge. I like that one.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
And then another one where I wanted to have it so that the actual hole was on the outside and the patch was on the inside. And then I have, what did I use? What are those little, I don't know what they're called. I can't remember the embroidery stitch name, where they're the little loops. They're like the petals of a flower.
Oh, Lazy Daisy.
Yeah. And then I had a hole, and I did not realize what this could possibly look like. And this may not be appropriate for all ages, but I did a patch here, and my sister's like, that looks like, you know, something. So I don't know about that. And I didn't even think about that when I was like, oh, I see what you mean. So anyway, so yeah, I just did this. So, but I wanted to show you guys this is my most proud one that I did.
Yes.
Oh, I love that.
So that was our anniversary, because we watched lots of cop shows where they say copy that all the time. So it's I love you and copy that. And Nancy, you were instrumental in this because it was your idea to do the raised little wire thing. Isn't that cool? And that's just wound around a pencil. I used all the colors that I used in the embroidery, and it's glue, just glue on the floss.
Wow.
That was such a cool idea. It just made it.
Oh, I thought maybe it was like a piece of wire, but you're saying it's floss that you...
Yeah, so that's floss, and I dragged it through glue and then wound it around a pencil and then just tacked it down on either side. Isn't that cool? That's
so cool.
It's a great idea. I can't remember where I picked that up from. I want to say that it was doll making. Because that's...
You make dolls?
I don't make dolls. I'm fascinated by miniatures and doll making. It's so, like, the attention to detail and the fine motor control that's necessary to make like miniatures or anything tiny is just absolutely floors me. And like, I love the talent that it requires, and I also just love how it looks. And I like tiny things. I like very small.
I love I do
I don't know why. I just
like making the dolls out of what?
So the dolls that I was looking at were slightly different. So it's fabric dolls that have like sometimes they have a wire armature, sometimes they don't. The skill that I saw for that coil was actually people that restyle like Barbies or Bratz dolls to be painted, and so like they'll be painted to look like a certain person or a character from a TV show or anime. And a lot of that is done with like acrylic hair as like a wig styling. So they'll restyle their hair. it's really cool. The artistic process that is necessary to go in that is really, I find that really fascinating. I was finding these things on YouTube and watching these videos of people restyling doll wigs, which just was like, I don't know, it's really cool. And then I did a lot of research a while ago about making my own fabric dolls. And there was a couple, it's like doll making kind of had its heyday in the 90s, especially fabric dolls, because I remember there were a couple of parents of girls that I was friends with growing up that made fabric dolls. And I remember from a very small age being really enchanted by how pretty they were and how gorgeous they turned out. And thinking to myself, like, I want to make that. I want to be able to do that someday. And then a lot of the research I was doing a couple years ago was talking about doll making as art therapy. So that was fascinating to kind of do that reading and get like 15 or 20 books from the library and just deep dive into something. That was one of my rabbit holes over the last couple years of research. But
making doll clothing is really, it's because it's small. Because I have a Raggedy Annie that my mother had made for me, and she needed new legs. And then like I think I was going to make a new apron for her because part of it had torn where the tie had torn off. And it's funny because I just found the apron the other day in a box of fabric. I was like, oh yeah, I never quite got to that because I think I got so frustrated stitching the small, like the pantaloons, because they have elastic at the bottom. Oh. I broke so many needles because I didn't really know what I was doing sewing elastic, but also it was just small. And what was my greater point with that? I forget. But yeah, I loved fabric dolls. But you know what? I was a big fan of Little House on the Prairie growing up. So my mom was as well. So she also made me other fabric dolls to play with. And the nice thing was they're so washable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I had American Girl dolls growing up, and that was, we used to go to arts and crafts shows when I was growing up to look for American Girl doll clothes. And we would get and like clothes for my dolls at these shows. And then I had a couple family members that would make them every once in a while. So I just had this dream for a while as an adult of like, if I had nieces and nephews or smaller cousins, like I would love to make fabric dolls for them and then make doll clothes. Like that would be really, really, really fun and a great way to learn apparel sewing without the fabric and time commitment to make my own clothes. Because
I don't know, they take up, I think, almost all the time, honestly.
I'm terrible with sewing clothes
because it's so much smaller. Like imagine like an apron tie. If you're gonna iron that, it's a bigger piece, but then on a doll, it's like this, I
used to knit a lot for my daughter's American Girls, which was like, that's doable. You could do a poncho in like an hour and then, or hats or scarves. I think I even knit like a couple actual pieces of clothes, but it was just much easier, and I knit some doll, like I knit my son a lobster, but it was like a doll. I mean, it's, the shape of a doll, like the arms, the tail, and the head, but it was a lobster. And he loved it.
Oh my God, that sounds so cute.
I love stuffed animal lobsters and crabs. They're just so cute.
Yeah. So
it's just so adorable.
I did spend a lot of time, or I knit them both like tiny little bunnies on like size 1 needles, but with arms and legs. Like I used to love doing that kind of stuff. But that seems more doable to me than like trying to sew something like that. I guess less.
Yeah. It's scary when it's small and you have your fingers by the needle and the machine. Oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not really sewing machines. So.
I actually like the thought of making clothes for dolls because I would hand sew it.
Well, there you go. That
would be, so like I look at it and like, that's a doable hand sewing project for me.
That just opened my eyes. That's what I should do with my Annie's apron. I should just hand sew it. Thank you, Nancy.
There you go.
I also watch Bernadette Banner on YouTube, and she does historical recreation sewing primarily from like the Victorian and Edwardian era. And 90% of the sewing she does is hand sewing for like these super elaborate dresses and couture clothing. And it's like, I can't hem a 25-yard skirt by hand. I would lose my mind very quickly. I love watching her do it, but I don't think I could do it my own. Now, a half-yard skirt for a doll, that I could do. Like that's doable for me. So.
My sister taught herself how to sew clothing by making my nephew a whole series of outfits when he was 1. So she made a little
cool.
vest, a little pant, and everything was the right size so she could get the practice and make all the mistakes, but she didn't have the time commitment of an entire adult outfit.
That's great.
So, yeah. That's cool.
We have several books in the library that I've gotten checkouts or that I've checked out for knitted animals and knitted and wardrobes to go with them that are knitted and then embroidered and hand sewn as well. But the one that I found recently that I died a little inside with happiness was Little Frog and Toad from Frog and Toad Are Friends.
What?
Yes, I'll send it to you. See, it is absolutely the most adorable thing that I've ever seen.
I love
with
Frog
their
and Toad.
Clothes.
Who does not love Frog and
Their-
Toad? Oh my
their
God.
little knitted clothes, and it was just like I need to.
Do they match clothes in the books?
Yes.
Everything
like
about
the
that.
little beret hat or whatever you call that.
Holy
Don't have
cow.
the hat, but there is a hat pattern in one of the knitted animal toy books that we have at the library that I was like, I could do the beret for that one and then make Frog and Toad and just like gift them to the library to use for story time.
Those things, I could
you
use those when
kids?
I tell Frog and Toad stories. It's like if I had those.
Oh, they would love that.
They would love that.
I mean, one of them does wear a hat, right? Am I imagining that?
He does. No, you're not.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sometimes. We do have a book in the library too about how to knit your own boyfriend. So
That was.
You know,
I couldn't take that seriously.
mm-hmm. So
It was great. Oh
yeah.
God, it was silly.
They have all different kinds in there, but a boyfriend.
Actually, the Frog and Toad pattern made it into the My Modern Met website.
Oh, really?
Yep,
Oh,
that's so cute.
I really want to do that.
That's
Those linked in the bottom for sure.
yeah. I'll
please.
send the link because it's just absolutely adorable and I love it. And I just
So
I don't know. They're knit in DK weight, which is totally doable. I get a little terrified when it's like knit a stuffed animal in fingering weight yarn, or sport weight yarn, which is so hard to find. I hate that. I'm like,
sport weight, yeah.
Yeah. It's almost impossible to find. I'm like, why do you do this to me? Can't find sport weight yarn. So I don't know.
So Pat, what projects do you have like a dream project, like something you've thought about that you've been wanting to do for years and you just never really gotten around to, or maybe you had, I don't know. Do you have any, like,
It's funny you should ask because, again, you guys were my inspiration. Heidi, I remember your AADL hoodie that you did. It was you, right, with the owl?
Yep. It's actually
Okay.
It's actually Friends of the Ann-Arbor District Library. It's a fat sweatshirt.
Yes. And combine that with Nancy's jean jacket that she has all of her cool stuff on. And I would like to take my AADL hoodie and just do whatever feels right at the time. So that's, at this point, one of my dream projects.
That's really cool.
How about you guys? What's your dream project, Heidi?
Oh my gosh.
Just one.
Well, can I have two? Because I have.
Yes,
I have one
of
for
course.
each medium. Let's make
I
it
have
easy.
two because I've recently decided that I'm probably never going to do this, and I brought up this person, this website before, spiritcloth.com, but there's other people who do something like her. But anyways, it's just we're stitching different pieces of fabric material together and holding them together with stitches, and it's very abstract and working with different stitches and sometimes different dyed fabrics and stuff. And I love the look of it. And it looks like it's also kind of one of those things where like you might do a stitch a day. Like you have a thing where you like, maybe for a year and it's like a stitch diary or something like that. Just like a project where it's kind of meandering and open.
Yeah.
But I don't know that I'm trying to like, because I was really pushing myself to get it done. Like, I'm going to do it this year. I even like coffee dyed and tea dyed some fabric. And I'm just like,
wow.
I feel like I'm forcing it and it's probably still not time, even though it's something I've looked at for over 10 years really to do.
So you'll know when it's time.
So right now my dream craft to get into is the Pin Loom. Getting a Pin Loom and
what does that mean?
A Pin Loom, it's a frame, it's a square, usually about a 4-inch square traditionally, and it has pins that you will wrap the yarn and back and forth to make your weft, and then you'll weave So I got that right. Weft, the other one.
I think so. I don't know.
Warp.
Thank you. Oh,
Warp
so it's
and
the
weft.
warp that you
Yeah.
make to weave the
Yeah.
weft. I knew I had it wrong. So at least
That
I
makes me
know
think of
whatever.
another one that I want to do. I forgot about it. I want to get some toile fabric that has the repeating pattern and then embroider little things going on in that pattern, like, a little cat over there or a mouse eating a leaf over there or something like that. Because I saw it years ago. Somebody had done that. I'm like, oh my God, that is so much fun. So that looked like it would be good. Because I like to do irreverent kind of things, and that would fit into it. Take something real staid and
That's my wheelhouse.
exactly. Well, all you guys really. How about you, Lucy? What's your dream?
Besides like knitting a perfectly executed sweater, like I've knit sweaters. I can't, like, there's always something for me where I'm just like, I would love to knit a sweater that I love to put on. And I'm like, this is beautiful. And that I can keep working on that. But then the other thing I think about doing a lot is we have a lot of quilts that were my husband's parents. Well, they're really his parents' quilts. So we inherited these quilts. And so they're like his grandparents' quilts. And we have used them all the time for like the 20 years we've been married. So they've been washed, they've been, and a lot of them are falling apart, which I kind of love. Like I love the look of a worn quilt, but some of them have bigger holes in them now. So I would love to find a way to use some of the quilts to repair other quilts, kind of like combining sashiko type embroidery or like what you were doing with your shorts there, Pat,
Yeah.
So I just don't have a clear vision for it, but I think it would be a really good way to preserve them, but do something fun. So
that's cool.
Yeah.
Okay, Nance.
So this is actually my dream project, kind of plays into a rabbit hole that I fell down last week. So I finally got the book from the library. It's the Royal School of Needlework's embroidered boxes, and it's making your own fabric covered boxes, constructing them out of mounting board and fabric and sewing them together to form. And the penultimate project in this book is a 17th century embroidery casket, and it's a big box that has all these doors and hinges and secret compartments. And like I've heard of these 17th century caskets and done a lot of research into them, and that was how I found the book, was through doing that research. Because there's not a lot of resources out there that are modern. There's a lot of antique resources on how to make these, but there's not a lot of modern resources. And that kind of sent me tumbling down a needlepoint and cross stitch hole, because it's a really, really niche thing in the embroidery and needlework world, are these little tiny they're called etuis, ETUI, and it's a sewing kit that you can take with you, and they come in like all different shapes and sizes. There's one that's a little toy box, and each thing on the inside is like a thimble holder or a needle case or a sewing or a measuring tape cover, and they're just super intricate and really well done. So I've always wanted to do one of those. So like do an etui and then a giant casket that for all of my embroidery floss that I've made myself. So those are the two main embroidery things of like, that's probably a pipe dream, but those would be like my magnum opus of embroidery. And then I'm with you, Lucy. I really want to do like a well-executed sweater. That's like a sweater that I want to wear all the time, that I love, something super bright and colorful. And then, so I'm still planning on doing the Soldotna crop. And then I found Stephen West published a pattern for a kimono sweater called the Penguono. And it uses, I want to use it as a stash buster because it's knit and chunky weight, but you can hold 3 colors of fingering weight together to get a marled effect. And I want to try that with all the blue yarns I have in my collection, because I've got so much blue yarn. It's ridiculous. So those are the 2 areas that like my dream projects.
Fun.
So what's next, Pat? What you got? What's your next work in progress?
It's really funny for this because I have been working on something so you gotta go by the pattern. Isn't that funny?
Oh, yeah.
I started it because it's really simple and it was a freebie that I got, who even knows when, I don't remember. And it's easy to do when I'm on the vestibule. So I started that. I'm almost done for once. So I was kind of proud.
That's great.
But I still have to finish the stinking quilt stuff because I got some more dates
Oh, I thought they were
for
done.
family events.
Oh yeah, so you want to share about this quilt?
Yeah.
This is a very cool project.
So my two sisters and I, the one who passed away and one of my older sisters, decided we'd do a family quilt to keep at our house that we have together up north. And it's the 12 months of the year and appropriate yarn for each of the months. Like this is December. And so my little sister we picked the materials out together. And my little sister did all of the quilting. She loved quilting. And my older sister did the calligraphy for the names and dates. And then I did the embroidery all in white. So we wanted to do white on white. It's everybody's birth dates and anniversaries, like wedding anniversaries for the immediate family. So we've had some weddings. And so I still have to add those. And I thought I was done, but gosh darn it, still more to do. So it's pretty cool. And once it's all done, I don't think my older sister and I are up for putting it together. We'll probably just have to hire somebody out. So if you guys are up for some quilting, I'd be glad to hire you.
One of the things that I pitched a while ago to add to the tools collection was a long arm quilter.
Nice.
And it was like I couldn't quite sell the idea because there are a lot of quilting shops in Ann Arbor and there are services that will do that. But I was just like, that would be the coolest thing ever. And I'm still on that soapbox of like
never say die.
Yeah. So I think it's more just like I love the idea of it. I don't know what it would actually look like feasibly. But it's a cool thought.
So the group that made those quilts that are in the downtown library, and their name escapes me right now. Do they still exist? Do you think, are they still around?
I don't know. I don't know who it is.
Oh, actually.
Great for me to bring something with no info.
That's one of the things, and that's, quilting groups are kind of not, they're not as common as they were when I was growing up, and I'm running into the same thing with like needlepoint circles, and a lot of like needlepoint patterns are not as, a lot of the designers are all retiring now within the last 5 years, and like subsequently will be retiring soon. So a lot of those resources are kind of disappearing.
I just feel like it's a program we haven't really ever run as anything like quilting related that I mean, not in my short experience of time working with the library. So maybe we have, but.
Do we have quilters on staff?
Potentially.
I don't know.
I'm sure we do, but I don't.
Among 200 plus people, I'm sure there's a quilter.
Yeah, that's true.
Who knows? Yeah.
That would be fun.
Because that's probably the only way I would ever do it, is if something like the library had a class, and I would go and like make a square. Because I've dabbled in it here and there years ago, but it's never been anything that's stuck with me.
Yeah, talk about too much math. Oh, there's no
measuring, and you gotta cut it.
Well, it's so precise.
Yes,
there's so much precision that's necessary with quilting. There is actually such a thing. Quilt. Yeah, that's why I wanted to do crazy quilting, because it's like it doesn't matter. You're just gonna slam a bunch of embroidery on it anyways. No, one of the things that it is actually a niche within the quilt. Niche things are like my thing. I'm just like finding all this like really hyper specific.
That's like the word of the day right now.
Yeah, it is. That's our summer game code if we had a summer game code.
Right.
Yeah, totally.
No, it's miniature quilts that are less than a foot by a foot. And like I could see myself doing that. I could also see myself doing English paper piecing.
Oh yeah.
Quilting. Like I could see myself doing that. But that, God, I don't know, the precision that it requires just makes me want to lay down and not move for a long time. It's just like, I don't know if I can do that. It's really daunting.
I wouldn't keep up with it. So
no, I don't think I would either, but
But
I
the
appreciate
quilts
it.
would go well with the fabric dolls that you're going to make because they always need a quilt for their bed.
I do.
There you
And
go.
little embroidered pillows.
It's true.
So sweet.
You could knit a little Afghan. That would work.
My aunt used to knit us Afghans for our
Crochet.
beanie babies.
Oh,
That's what I
cute.
like. When I learned to knit as a child, all I knit was not Afghans, but I knit rugs for my dollhouse, and then sometimes scarves for other things. So it was the same thing. It was just like garter stitch, either more rectangular or more long. But I just made tons of those. So, and they would have been good blankets too on the dollhouse bed. Yeah,
I'm heavy sighing because I'm like, I'm just gonna want to knit all the tiny things now.
Nothing wrong with that.
I can just feel my cue screaming from Ravelry of like, don't forget me. Please do these projects first.
Well, those are pretty much all the questions or things that I could think of. So I really appreciate you joining us, Pat. This has been
Thank you,
for the
Pat.
invite.
so fun.
It's been a pleasure. Love talking to you guys.
And now we all have like more projects and more ideas thanks to you.
Mm-hmm.
Good. I like that.
It's a successful crafty chat when we walk away with a ton of things that we want to start working on.
I know. My fingers are itching right now.
Yeah. Alrighty. Well, thank you, Pat, for joining us again. It's a pleasure to have you. And thank you, everybody, for watching us today on Crafty Chat. I will see you in 2 weeks with episode 26. In the meantime, stay safe, stay healthy, and don't forget to love each other. Bye, everybody.
Bye.